Brexit means Brexit, and we're going to make a success of it.
Critici betwijfelen echter of ze er wel alles aan zal doen om Groot-Brittannië snel uit de Europese Unie te laten treden.
There will be no attempts to rejoin it by the back door, no second referendum. The country voted to leave the European Union, and as Prime Minister I will make sure that we leave the European Union.
Ja, en vanavond sprak ik met Nina Schick in Londen. Zij is van de eurosceptische denktank Open Europe. En ik vroeg haar eerst wat voor premier Theresa May zal zijn.
I think a lot of people are glad that she's going to be the Prime Minister because amongst all the shenanigans we've seen in Westminster and all the political backstabbing, she's seen as somebody who's quite steely, determined, a tough negotiator. Let's not forget that she's been the Home Secretary for a number of years and she's had to deal with terrorism, counter-terrorism, and she's also had experience of negotiating at the EU level. So a lot of people in Westminster be letting out a sigh of relief, thinking that in the very tough negotiations to come, Theresa May is hopefully going to be like a new Margaret Thatcher and get the best for Britain.
But isn't it strange that all the Brexit proponents failed to gain the leadership of the Conservative Party, and now a pro-Remain politician is going to negotiate a Brexit?
Absolutely, and part of that is to do, again, with the political assassinations that we've seen taking place in Westminster over the past 2 weeks or so. So Boris had to step out, Boris Johnson had to step out because Michael Gove, who was another leading Brexiteer, stabbed him in the back. Then he couldn't get the support of the parliamentary party behind him either. So we were left with this position where we had Theresa May and Andrea Leadsom, who was a Brexiteer. She was a fairly junior cabinet minister, so she didn't have that much experience of negotiation. So the thing was that Andrea Leadsom couldn't get the support of the parliamentary party behind her, which she needed in order to actually become the Prime Minister. So in the end, it does fall upon the shoulders of a Remainer to negotiate the Brexit deal for the UK. Interestingly, though, Theresa May was a very reluctant Remainer. She always was very Eurosceptic, and throughout the campaign, she didn't campaign at all, really. She only made 2 interventions, and one of those interventions before the referendum was to say that free movement of people needs to be reformed, even if the UK had voted to stay in the EU. So she's seen, I think, as a very pragmatic, very Eurosceptic Prime Minister, so that given her experience, that kind of tallies into the mood of the country. I think people are just satisfied that she's going to be the Prime Minister because they feel that she's a pair of safe hands to lead the country through a very difficult political, economic and constitutional crisis.
So what kind of Brexit will she strive for?
Well, this is obviously something that we don't know yet, and we can't know until those negotiations actually begin. What's very clear now is that she is the one who has to trigger Article 50. That's the formal exit clause for the UK to leave the EU, and only the UK has the power to do that. So before she does that, she's already indicated she's not going to be doing that this year. She's only going to be doing it next year. Before she does that, she's going to get a team together, a team of trade negotiators. Ironically, a lot of them are going to have to be migrants because the UK doesn't actually have that many trade negotiators, as well as a whole variety of civil servants and people from the private sector to put together this team to actually go forward with these negotiations of the next years. What I think ultimately will be the trade-off is, given how important migration was in the referendum debate here, they will try to get some changes to free movement of labour. Of course, the EU is saying you can't have access to the single market without the 4 freedoms, including free movement. And that's, I think, where in the end the negotiations are really going to kick off. It's going to be free movement of labour versus some degree of market access. And what it is actually going to look like, well, we realistically will not even have an idea of that for the next few years.
Is it likely that in the end the whole Brexit affair will not change much?
Well, I think we're in the beginning of a very, very long and protracted and difficult negotiation. It's true, I think, again, as I already mentioned, that migration was such an important issue that will have to be addressed somehow in the renegotiation. But of course, there's also the reality that a lot of what was promised during the Brexit campaign, including we will no longer have to make any budget contributions to the EU, we'll be able to have complete control over our borders, including the number of EU migrants who are able to come into this country. We'll also be able to have complete sovereignty over our affairs. a lot of politicians are going to have to face up to the fact that compromises are going to have to be made on either side. And a lot of politicians are going to be eating humble pie. But the politicians who obviously led the Brexit campaign are not now leading the Brexit negotiations. So that is the irony of the situation in which we now find ourselves.
Nina Schick, thank you very much for being on our program. Thank you.
Thank you.